Welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Well, turns out that chapter 30 turns out to be a very puzzling chapter. And we're getting right into the thick of it in today's lesson. And please God, and through the rest of this week, as we look at Parshat vaYetzei, we'll get further into it. And as you know, my basic approach is to see the Torah as sacred literature, and to understand, to use the kinds of criteria by which one examines literature and tries to get a better understanding of it. And so we are going to be, as you're going to see, now that Joseph was finally born after spending 14 years with Laban, Jacob is ready to leave. He isn't going to leave for another 6 years because it's going to take him 6 years to gain enough to be able to sustain himself. And when he left Isaac and Rebekah, he mentions to God a little later on in one of the most beautiful prayers. He says to God, I crossed this river with my robe and my staff. That was it. And now he is going to amass quite a fortune. So let's see. So here we go. Verse 25. Vahi kasher yalda Rachel et Yosef, and it was so that when Rachel bore Yosef, Vayomer Yaakov el Laban, Jacob said to Laban, Shalcheni, send me, Va'elcha, so that I can go, and I will leave El Makomi Ulartzi, to my place and to my land. Finally going to return, right, after 14 years of exile. Kasher Yalda Rachel et Yaakov. So what's, again, Rashi using the rabbinic method of looking deeply into the meanings of these verses, right? What motivated him to say that? Why would he say that at that particular point? And why Dafka only after Rachel gave birth to Joseph? I mean, he had a lot of other children at the time too, right? In fact, he had 11 other sons at that point. Right? Sorry, excuse me, 10 other sons at this point, because only Joseph and Benjamin were going to be left at this point. Benjamin, of course, only a twinkle in his eye. At any rate, Kasher Yalda Rachel Yosef, when Rachel bore Joseph. Mi shenolad sitno shel Esav. The reason is because Joseph represents Esau's adversary. Shinemar, how do we know this? In what sense do we see Joseph as being the adversary of Esau? And there's symbolism involved in that, deeper than I understand at this point. And this we see in the prophet Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 18. Here is the quote: V'haya Beit Yaakov Eish, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, Uveit Yasov lehava, and the house of Joseph a flame, Uveit Esav lakash, and the house of Esau straw. So we are talking about some ultimate redemption that will take place, and that there is this, in this sense, this tension, which I really think is in fact going on, to the extent that there is a denial of a creator, a denial of a transcendent level of existence, and that as human beings we are capable of appreciating and sensing the grandeur of this world, and the one who created this world, made all of reality possible, and that stands outside of this reality. And it's possible that Esau does not represent this. And of course, there's a lot of subtlety involved, because Esau is Jacob's twin, right? They are twins. And yet there is this rivalry, this deep rivalry going on in terms of what Esau represents and what Jacob represents. So now that Joseph is born, there is a material change in the dynamics. And Rashi goes on to explain, Eish belo lahava, fire without a flame, eno sholet, it is not going to be able to prevail. Lemerachok, right? And it means from, that would be from Eino Sholet Lemerachok. It has no ability to act beyond its immediate place. In other words, if there's a fire, like you think of a charcoal fire, that fire that's glowing, right? It's not going to really affect anything of some distance. But when they're actual flames, and in California, we've experienced this in very painful kinds of ways, the flames leap up and can affect other things, and it can be pretty destructive. So Jacob represents the fire, and Joseph represents the flames. Mishenolad Yosef, right? From the moment that Joseph was born, Batach Yaakov Bakadosh Baruch Hu. It's interesting turn of phrase here, because literally it means Jacob trusted the Holy One, blessed be He, Veratzah Lashuv, and at this point he desired to return. So, saying that Jacob trusted in God as if he didn't, right? Unless what Rashi means here is that he trusted that despite his own inability up to that point to defend himself against Esau, that now that Joseph, after all these years when Rachel was incapable of conception, that God was going to see him through, that he felt confident that even though he himself and alone couldn't have protected himself, that nevertheless with Joseph, he'd be fine. So a little bit more background here in terms of that very, very, very special relationship that Jacob had with Joseph. And of course, we are going to be set up for that. In other words, the whole Joseph story, where he is taken away because of the jealousy of the brothers, and he's removed from Jacob, is totally set up in terms of the sense of tragedy that Jacob is going to experience. So knowing this, knowing that had it not been for Laban's trickery, Jacob would have had one wife, Rachel. That was it. And we are told that he was in love with her. So love can be very painful, can be very painful. At any rate, going on. So he says this is this conversation he's having with Laban. He says, Tna et nashai, give me my wives, ve'et yeladai, and my children, asher avadati otcha bahem, for whom I served you, ve'elecha, and let me go. Ki ata yadata, for you know, et avodati asher avadaticha, you know, and we'd have to sort of put in English parenthetically, the quality of my work with which I served you. You understand how much I have served you. Up to this point, it's 14 years, 14 years. So, Kasher Yalda Rachel et Yosef, right? So we had that, and we're going on to now Kaf Vav. Tna et Nashai, give me my wives, etc. So, of course, they are his wives, right? So why was he saying this to Laban? And the understanding Rashi gives us is, Eni rotze latzet ki im berashut, because I don't want to depart except with permission. I want you to understand why I'm leaving, and I would want your permission, since I'm serving you, to give me that permission to leave. That certainly might beg other questions, but it certainly is an interesting sort of lesson in terms of Menschlichkeit, right? That when you're working for someone, when you're serving someone, and you want to end the relationship, to do it in such a way that it's done with a full heart. That's very important. Okay. Vayomer elav Laban, and so Laban said to him, Im namatzat chen beinecha, if in fact I have found favor in your eyes, nichashti, right? And this is an interesting word. It can mean, okay, that linachesh can sort of be to use divination, right? Divination uh, to determine something. But nichashti in modern Hebrew, I think means sort of like I suspect. But I guess it can be both in a positive and a negative sense as well. But here, of course, it's positive, right? So, v'yavacheni Hashem b'galecha, that the Lord has blessed me on your account. So Lavan is admitting this, right? He's saying it. I understand. Going here. Nachashti. So I've divined, right? Menachesh hayiti, right? So he's saying, yeah, he used divination, right? Nisiti benichush sheli. I tried out with my acts of divination. And by the way, interestingly enough, there is some foreshadowing going on here because when Joseph puts his cup in Benjamin's sack and the brothers return to Egypt, Joseph talks about this ability to divine what was going on. And again, it sort of opens up other kinds of questions as to, what is behind this particular way of looking at reality. At any rate, without giving explanations, right? She'al yadcha, but I used my divination, my instruments of divination. She'al yadcha ba'ali bracha, that the blessing came on account of you, right? By your doing this, your serving me. Keshebata lakan, why? When you came here, lo hayu li banim, I had no sons. Shinimar, because we can infer that from the fact that it says, Vahine Rachel bito ba imatzon, where the other shepherds say to Jacob when he first comes to Haran, they say to him, Here, look, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. And Rashi asks the question, if Shah yesh lo banim, is it possible that Lavan had sons, v'hu sholech bito, and he'd be sending his daughter? I mean, it's just wouldn't have been done. So clearly he had no sons, and that's why he was sending Rachel to be a shepherdess. Right? V'sholech bito etzel haroim, that he'd be sending his daughter, and look at this, amongst the shepherds. In other words, this idea of sending a woman, all right, amongst these men who are all there, that's in a sense putting her in danger, right? Why would he do that? If he had sons, he wouldn't do it. But we realize, the possible hanky-panky that would be going on if this happened. V'achshav hayulo, but now he had. We know he had sons, a couple all the way down here. Banim, Shenemar, because it says a little later on, haven't gotten to it yet, Vayishma it divrei vnei Lavan. And Jacob heard the words of the sons of Lavan. So Lavan understands us. Going on. Vayomer, and nakva scharcha, let us establish your wages. Sorry. Nakva scharcha alai v'atena. Okay. Let your wages uh, be established. Okay. You tell me what you want me to pay you for Atena, and I will give it to you. So on the surface, this is sounding very decent on Laban's part, that he is admitting that he has had great fortune on account of Jacob, and as a result, he's saying, you tell me what you want me to pay you, and I'll pay you. You tell me, Laban is saying to Jacob. Let's see here if there's anything. Yes, right. So, okay. So, nakva scharcha, right? Declare what your wages are to be. And he says, Rashi says, katargumo. This is just the way it's, in other words, we should understand this in exactly the way Onkelos translates it, parish agarcha, right? So he's saying, state your wages, state your wages. So again, sometimes the Hebrew is a little bit more difficult, arcane, difficult to understand, and the Onkelos is helping us out, and so is Rashi, of course. So, Vayomer Elav, and he said to him, this is Jacob talking to Laban, Ata yadata, you know, you understand. Eight asher avadaticha, just how I have served you, ve'et asher haya miknecha iti, and how your cattle were with me, how I took responsibility for your cattle, ki ma'at, or your flocks, ki ma'at asher haya lacha lefanai, okay, because just as there were just a few, there was ma'at, just a little bit, before me, and I think he's saying before I arrived, right? Vayifrotz larov, and they have literally broken out to many. In other words, they've multiplied and become many. Vayivarech et Hashem otcha, and the Lord has blessed you liragli, and this sounds to me because of the responsibility that I had for them, right? Because of my concern for them, my responsibility. And by the way, I do want to say that I've mentioned before that the word barech has to do with having lots, right? With having lots of something. That when you're baruch, when you're blessed, it means you don't ever have to worry about running out. So it means having many. And we can see the use of this word barech, and baruch a number of times in this passage. Va'ata, and now, mata ese gam anochi leveti. When can I do the same thing for my own household? In other words, I've done this for you. At what point can I do this for myself? Let's take a look and see if we have any Rashi on. Here we go. So we have this phrase liragli, which means literally at my feet, at my feet, and it is actually an idiom, and he's quoting here. Rashi's quoting Bereshit Rabbah, right? Im ragli, meaning with my feet, literally. Bishvil bi'at ragli, right? But itzlacha habracha. He says, on account of the fact that my feet arrived, right? Have the blessing has come to you. So again, it's saying something to the effect that of my responsibility. In other words, the fact that I am present, the fact that I've taken responsibility for your flocks, you have gotten this blessing. It's on account of the performance with which I took care of your flocks. And he gives other examples. Rashi gives other examples. So, for example, in Exodus chapter 11, Ha'am asher biraglecha. So again, we're talking about the nation which is literally at your feet, but it means it is under your responsibility. I believe that's the way we could now understand this phrase biraglecha. Again, in Judges chapter 8, La'am asher I think this is Beraglai, maybe, all right, or Beragli, I'm not certain. But again, talking about the people that are my responsibility, that I'm responsible for. Habaim imi, that is, who come with me. That's how Rashi understands. So it could be that Beragli he's simply saying that accompany me. That certainly seems to be what how Rashi is understanding this. So in other words, that we're all together in this, and literally has that understanding that we're talking about now a group, right? Or because it says with me specifically, as I've tried to explain it, means that somehow I have responsibility. But as I'm thinking this through and discussing this with you, I'm tending to think towards what Rashi is saying here, which simply means that when it says liragli, that phrase just simply means along with me, along with me. So again, slowly as I go over this material, I try to clarify and start off with one proposition and then in the process come up with another idea, which perhaps is a little closer to what it really means. Okay. Gam anochi leveiti, right? I too for my household. Letzorech beiti, all right? And that would be for the need of my household. And the Rashi gives us an interesting interpretation. Achshav ein osin letzorki, right? Right now, they're not able to, sorry, I have to finish this up. Osin letzorki ella banai. So he says, right now, taking care of my affairs is dependent on my children. My children, my sons, are taking care of my of the affairs of my household. V'tzarich ani liot oseh gam ani imayim. And the truth is, I also have to be able to do with them, to be able to provide these needs, the samchan, and that is to support them, bezehu gam. And this is the implication of this word gam here, that up to this point I haven't been able to, and you need to give me that ability to help my sons, help me develop my own property, etc. Going on. Vayomer, so Laban to Jacob, Ma eten lach, and he says, so what do you want me to give you? What should I give you? Vayomer Yaakov, and Jacob said, Lo titen li me'uma, right? You don't need to give me a thing, im ta'aseh li hadavar zeh, if you do this for me. You don't have to actually turn over anything to me or gift me in any way. If you do this thing for me, what is it? Ashuva, let me return. Soncha, and I will shepherd your sheep. Ishmor, I will guard them. So it's interesting because we've got a mercha tipcha. So it does look to me as if it's I will shepherd your sheep. Although it could be, right, if it weren't for the way in which this appears to be punctuated, right, that it would be, I will shepherd, I will act as a shepherd, Suncha Ishmor, I will guard your sheep. But it doesn't appear to be, this is the punctuation element of these ta'amim here. So. And I don't think this Rashi has anything to say about this. No. Our next verse will be 32. Evor bechol tzoncha hayom, right? I will go over all your sheep to hayom, haser misham, and I think hayom would be today. Haser misham, remove from there, kol se nakod v'talu, and this is where this starts to get arcane. So he says, remove from there any sheep that is spotted or with patches. V'chol se chum, and any sheep that is brown, a reddish brown, baksavim, amongst the sheep. V'talu v'nakod. Okay, so again, so sometimes this is translated as striped, but patches possibly, v'nakod, and spotted, ba'izim, amongst the goats, v'hayas chari, and let that be my reward. That should be my wages. Let's take a look here. So we've got these words here that are not so clear, what nakod and talu and what have you, and Rashi's going to try and explain these words to it. So nakod menumar bechabar burot. So in other words, and the word namer is the Hebrew word for leopard. So in other words, we're talking about speckled, maybe is a good word here, becharburot dakot, with thin or light spots, something like that. Kamo nikudot, like dots, like dots. And he gives you the French word pontre, belas, and the Yiddish punktiert. So in other words, it's spotted. Talu, and this word talu, lashon tlaim, it has the connotation or the meaning of patches. Chabar burot rechavot, wide spots. Chum, this word chum, shechum domel adom. He says that it's brown, but it looks like it's red. It's a reddish brown. And here, rose, this looks like rosa belaz, and rot in German and rota is definitely red, right? Lashon Mishnah, and he quotes the Mishnah. He says there's an expression in the Mishnah, shecham shechamtit v'nimtzeit levana. Okay, I think I'm reading it correctly, right? So there's the word chum, right? Shechamtit, a reddish, a reddish brown. V'nimtzeit levana, and this is talking about produce, and regarding tfuah, it's produce, right? So sometimes there's this expression shechamtit v'nimtzeit levana, that it's supposed to be, I think it means that it's supposed to be this reddish brown, and it turns out to be white, right? So then what is it? Is it ripe? Is it etc.? What's its status? V'hayaschari, and let that be my reward. Otan sheyuldu mikan ulaba, all those sheep and goats that are born now and in the future. Nekudim utluim ba'izim. So again, we're saying speckled and striped, etc., amongst the goats. Ushechumim baksavim, and those which are this reddish brown amongst the sheep. Usually they will be mine. V'otan sheyeshnan achshav, right? And as for those that right now are in that condition, right? Hafresh mehem, right? Take them away, remove them from the flock right now, these ones that have these spots and speckles and streaks and what have you, okay? V'hafkidem biyad banecha, and put your sons in charge of them. Shelo tamar, why? So that you should not say in the future to me, al hanoladim me'ata, those that are born from this point on, elu hayu sham metchila. They actually were there originally. They were part of my flock, you're going to say. He's saying to Laban, right? For Od, and not only that, Shelo Tumar li, and that you shouldn't say to me, Al Yedei Ascharim, right? That they also came into existence because the males, right? The males, Shehin Nikudim Utluim, that are spotted and streaked, Teladna Hanakavot, so that for that reason the females gave birth, Dugmatam, like the males. They looked like the males, mikan va'elach, from this point on. In other words, seems to me that he's saying to Lavan, I want you to remove any sheep, male, female, etc., that has any streaks or spots or is this reddish brown, and that whatever, as far as I'm concerned, whatever future sheep should have these qualities will be mine, right? And you will have no reason to think that I have taken anything from you at this point. So I'm going to stop right here and we'll continue. And I can tell you that it's going to get even more arcane in a little bit when we see the process with which Jacob is able to gain these flocks. So I'm going to stop the share. Okay. Uh, you're getting into animal husbandry, right?
No, I like it.
Okay.
I
We're
got
going
a
to see.
question. Why do you like it?
I like it because Rashi goes into detail and he's, looking at the language and from what it is derived. And, he's basically using his encyclopedic knowledge of Mishnah and Onkelos and you name the sources to explain and amplify the text.
Right. What we are going to be challenged with is what's this really all about?
That's my
Okay.
question.
What is it? What is it really? Why are we going into all these details? And I mean, we haven't done enough of it yet to try and start analyzing that element of it. But there is, I mean, I cannot help but feel that there is some deeper message going on here.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah. Harlan.
Leah had how many children did Leah have? Six?
Yes.
Yes, she did,
Six.
plus a daughter.
And one daughter,
Correct.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How many children did Rachel have?
Two.
Two. That's eight. Where did the other four come in? Were
Bilhah and
combined?
Zilpah. Remember, Laban had given handmaids to Rachel and Leah, and they each provided two more children apiece.
Okay.
So,
When if I marry a goy, I mean, if I marry, say I'm a woman that marries a goy, but I'm a Jewish woman. If I have a child, my child is Jewish. Is that correct?
yes,
Even
at
though
least
my
that
husband's not
status is
Jewish.
Jewish. Yes. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Then what about these maids that produce kids? They're not Jewish.
So, Harlan, they're really, at this particular point, we aren't talking about that particular process. Okay? This is before the Jewish people became a nation. We're
Oh,
simply talking about a family. So that's one of the ideas. Another idea, because of course you're raising an important issue, is the fact that there was a time, quite possibly, where if a woman who was not Israelite or not Jewish
yeah.
married a Jewish man or an Israelite man, her
Mhm.
status became the same as her husband's. That
Oh,
she would take on the status of her husband.
aha.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but the idea of formal conversion actually takes place more under rabbinic, that I think we're more aware of that process, in rabbinic time rather than biblical time. Now, the closest we come to conversion, of course, is in the book of Ruth. So with this, I'm going to end today's lesson.